Hey everybody, this is Rhino and we are doing the Steam Fall List Cleanup. Today we're doing games starting with the letter U, and if we can move fast enough, all the way through to the end, because frankly there's not a lot of games out here. We'll be looking at U Factor here as an example, although in all fairness this is an early access game that came out April 15th, 2019, so it really shouldn't be considered. Um, what happens is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I look at every new video game that comes out while also playing Hearthstone and talking about video game news. If a game looks good enough where I might be interested in purchasing it and covering it on my YouTube channel, I put it on the fall list, wait till I get at least an arbitrary number here of 20 user verified reviews purchase. This number is people who actually bought the game through Steam, so Steam knows they actually paid money for it, and that those of those 20 reviews, it's 75% positive or more is pretty much what we're looking for. Or we're considering games that came out before January 1st, 2019, which as of this recording would mean that they've been out for more than 6 months and they haven't gotten 20 verified user reviews, and thus they're not really relevant. Meanwhile, we're also looking for red flags. For instance, one red flag I can tell immediately from U-Factory is that it is a Satisfactory clone. Although that being said, Satisfactory I do not believe is in Steam anymore. Yeah, so unless it's misspelled, I cannot find Satisfactory on Steam anymore. I believe it is somehow become an Epic Store exclusive. This game also, in its screenshots, gets dangerously close to an accidental swastika, which tends to happen. There's nothing really wrong with this game otherwise, I would imagine, other than it's an early access, and I just refuse to play early access games. That being said, it's not been out 6 months, so it's not like it's been out in early access for a considerable amount of time. We'll be looking for price. If something is really, really expensive for what it seems like, that wouldn't make it to the wish list. Wish list being the list above the fall list that we're going through. I want to make sure a game has a good single player experience, because I'm not really capable of reviewing a multiplayer experience. That's going to be different for everybody. There might be a way to get some generalities as far as that, but if I review the game, most of the games I review are many years old, so they have no player base for multiplayer anyways. But if I review the game day one and play the multiplayer, that experience would be very different from somebody who played the game like 5 years later or even 6 months later. Also, even if I review the game as multiplayer elements day one, I might get connected with and play with some really good people that are great to play with, and I have a great time, where other people might get connected with terrible people, or vice versa. On a rare occasion, we might see something on the fall list that is a low effort game. A red flag of a low effort game is if it supports English and Russian or English and Chinese only. Usually if a game targets the English language and the Russian language and no other languages, or the English language and Chinese only, there's a higher percentage chance that that game is a very low effort asset flip piece of garbage. Achievements might be a red flag. If it's a 99-cent game with 100 achievements, that's an achievement game. If it's a game that has only one achievement, that too might be an achievement game, although probably not not something you can really rely by. Very rarely have I seen games have one achievement. We might look at what the Steam recommendation engine says. There clearly are some other games where you run a factory and simulate running a factory, although Project Hospital, which is, I believe, a clone of 2 Points Hospital, is also a similar strategy game. Magnum Opus is a programming alchemy game, kind of the same idea though. There's little bits of these ideas certainly in what's getting recommended, but not direct one-to-one comparisons. And even though Steam's recommendation engine, Steam Discovery 2.0, was way better than 1.0, it's still pretty bad, particularly if nobody has purchased the game. So it can't really compare other games that somebody who had purchased this game to make better recommendations. If we're still trying to consider, we could come down to the reviews and look at the negative reviews. I find most positive reviews, almost all positive reviews, completely terrible and unuseful. Although this negative review, I like the concept, but way too complex and nuanced to be fun. I have never really agreed with the idea that nuanced would mean not fun. But maybe there is some getting into the weeds with it. That being said, if I was going to compare the 2 negative reviews to the 11 positive reviews here, I really would just have to go to Mob Rule and say, well, there's way more positive rules. And of course I can always make a special exception to the list too, and just say, yes, I do want this on the wish list. As for U-Factory, it's still kind of in a holding pattern because it's still in early access. Although we will run into some games that are in early access and have been in early access for way too long, and then I'll just take them off. Also, we might run into some adult games, so I have this blurring function. That's me, not you. I'll come over to the side and put in a notepad file the names of games that I want to add to the wish list, because everything that gets left open as far as a Chrome tab will just get removed later. It is also worth mentioning that while we're at the end here, I still have about 50% of 16 gigabytes of RAM being taken up, so pages may not be loaded by default, and they may be slow to load screenshots or even reviews. And that's actually a good point, I guess, to point out that this is a great example of a game, of a point where, had I just opened a small section of Chrome tabs at once, how would that have worked versus opening everything? It would have taken a lot more time, frankly, because it's easier for me to take an hour to open hundreds and hundreds of tabs than it is to take a 5-minute break before potentially 20 plus recordings to open just a few of them. This doesn't look like this needs to be reloaded, so we'll leave this as it is. All the thumbnails and everything are loaded up. That is nice to see. Maybe we won't run into any problems, and the potential final episode will finally start looking a little bit more professional. That'd be nice. Next game we have to consider here is Ultimate Fishing Simulator. I am always on the lookout for a fishing game. I'm not sure I really would ever want to play a fishing game, but there definitely are categories of games where I'd like to show off the concept once. Like, I would play FIFA or Madden once, but I definitely am not a fan of sports games like FIFA or Madden, so I wouldn't play every iteration of them. The thing that I keep running into usually with fishing games is they are very pretty looking, but there's something that's not quite right there. So maybe this is the one to finally break that trend, and one to go with. There might be some unrealistic expectations too. There might be people who actually are very very much real world fishers, and they want the experience to feel very much like fishing in the real world, and that might not be actually doable. Or there might be people that want fishing to feel more like an arcade experience. That could be also a problem. That being said, the reviews for this game in particular are 83% positive of 1,203 user reviews. That is a lot of reviews. It's 80% positive in the last 30 days, so there's not been a significant amount of change there. The reason why we want to see at least 20 reviews is it's a number I picked out of the air, but I imagine you could get 10 people to buy your game and review it positively, but you would probably struggle to not either get caught by Steam or to actually convince 20 people to buy your game and review it positively. It seems like that's pretty much true, because there are hundreds upon hundreds of games on Steam that have below 20 user reviews. 20 also is, I guess, a little bit double the 10 reviews I think Steam really wants before it starts calculating whether it's positive or negative. This game is $10.99, which is actually quite surprising, because I would have thought a game like this, being a little bit of a niche, would have gone for $60 at minimum, even as an older game. And it's not really that old. It came out August 30th, 2018. If you buy the full bundle, you get, it's only $16.77 right now. It's discounted. It's about half off. So that sale may not be going on at this point. Yeah. Full English audio, for whatever that means. 63 achievements. That seems fine. Seems like a Android game from the same developer is out. The Android game is called Professional Simulating Fishing. This is called Ultimate Fishing Simulator. So Metacritic gave it a 70. Apparently it's a VR version is in development. So at this point it's almost more of a issue. If I was to look at the negative reviews, the 215 negative reviews, I'm looking for trouble, when really I should just go mob rule. This is good enough. Oddly, Ultimate Games SA is that the developer or the publisher? It's the publisher. Yeah. The odd collection of things that the publisher is promoting, because this is definitely something the publisher clicks on, where they're promoting a horror adventure game, point and click, called Bad Dream Fever and Bad Dream Coma, right in between Professional Fishing, which is mixed reviewed, and also Prodigy Tactics, which is mixed reviewed, and Earthworms, and Down to Hell, and then Farm Expert, which is mostly negative, and Gatekeeper, which is mixed reviewed, and Bouncy Bob, which doesn't even have 10 reviews. There's kind of a bad association here. Like, this publisher, the games I just saw were not well reviewed, even their other fishing game. Meanwhile, if you're going to compare this to other games that are on Steam, Fishing Planet might be a consideration. It's a free-to-play game, so I assume there might be some in-app purchases. There's a game called Just Fishing that's free-to-play. Rushing Fishing 4, I assume, is not that good. There's a pretty large amount of fishing games, but I've really not run into great ones. Here, Summer in Mara is not a standard fishing game so much as it is a Stardew Valley clone, where fishing would be a part of that gameplay. I suppose there's no real desire to play as a fisher in a commercial fishing vessel. That's way too much like doing someone's job, where fishing from a pole as a hobby is more of a hobby thing. So here we have a meh review. Honestly, one of the worst games I've actually played. Rapal's Pro Bass Fishing was 10 times better. It was made a decade ago, waste of money. It was loving play that's managed to progress to level 15 and was close to 16 when you can start catching marlin. Seems like this is just a technical thing. Game is boring to me, you might like it. Now, if I was to go back to all of the reviews, the most helpful review is right here. As the first bit hesitant about the game as it's more complex than its predecessor Eurofisher, but once you get into it, it took about 20 minutes. It's a lot more fun and actually quite simple too. A variety of maps and fish is brilliant, and it's a nice chilled out game until your line snaps. Definitely recommended this, lots of fun either by yourself or with your friends. And if you look at the main page here, you have to scroll really low down to see anything negative, and the most recent reviews, which are over here, are all positive. And everything here has the symbol saying it was actually purchased through Steam. I see no key activations or product was received for free notifications. So you really, in this case, have to fall under mob rule. It's 83% positive. Some people don't like it. That's normal. It would be a little suspicious if there was 1,203 reviews and it was 100% positive. This might have been a game that was not so good at the beginning of its life and eventually got fixed. If we look at the graph here, I'm not seeing really a major case of that. You have the initial launch with 120 positive reviews compared to 42 negative reviews, and then you have more positive reviews, although there is a pretty significant drop off in the amount of sales for quite a while, and then it must have gone on sale again at that point and really pushed to get a lot more sales. In these two metrics here, that's nearly double the number of units sold. And then after that popularity spike happened, you're seeing significant amounts of sales and significantly higher percentages of positive reviews compared to negative reviews. Like this little negative spike here is like 6 negative reviews compared to 25 positive reviews. So unless they're doing an excellent job of review manipulation that I don't think you could actually get away with on Steam, whatever problems some people had seem to not be in line with the standard market of consumers that would want to play a fishing game. So I'm going to put Ultimate Fishing Simulator on the wish list, and then going to move over to the next game so that we can move a little bit faster. Here's Fishing Planet in comparison that looks a little bit better. I would want a fishing game to look as hyper realistic as possible, until perhaps you put in a gutting mini game, or in which you're skinning and gutting the fish. I think that probably would be unacceptable. That being said, how does this make money? Well, it's free to play, and then it has 38 pieces of DLC, which I think you have to buy for $876.62. I imagine you don't need to buy all of this, but you're heavily encouraged to buy some of this for sure at a pretty significant price. So I would much rather pay up front for a game and instead of play a free-to-play game and work through that. So yeah, this is not a game that would make it to the wish list. Moving on to the next game, starting with the letter U, we have Unbox Newbie's Adventure. This came out September 5th, 2016. It's 88% positive of 205 user reviews. I think this game may have been a little bit buggy when I first put it on the file list, or this is not the game I think it is, but I think this is the game I think it is, which means nothing really. What happens is I find it somewhat helpful, although sometimes it puts me on the path of a red herring to watch speedrunners cover games. Awesome Games Done Quick and the European Speedrunners Association's YouTube channels are quite useful to watch speedrunners run games, and they often run games that are bad or games that haven't been heard of before, and often games that haven't been heard of before are bad. This is a game I saw speedrun. I'm not a speedrunner. I'd actually want to play this game in the way that it's supposed to be played, although this is a game about a package trying to deliver itself and mail as fast as possible. So it is kind of this strategic, tactical rolling game. They're calling it an open world 3D platformer. I imagine this had some problems with it originally, and they fixed it. Either that or it was in early access, and it's now out of early access. Now, there can be certainly some dangers of things coming out of early access and them not really being finished. A Hat in Time being much is getting compared here to it, and A Hat in Time is much more of a Super Mario Bros. 64 style 3D platforming game, and definitely a game I want to play. You don't have a lot of 3D platforms on Steam, so again, I could look for trouble and look at the negative reviews, but there are 83 negative reviews to 382 positive reviews, so I would really be cherry picking and listening to the negative voices, when really this is more of a case of a mob rule. And yeah, I think we're starting to run out of RAM again, so reviews are gonna be a problem. Longer play sessions of this game gives me nausea. Okay, I can understand that. This person activated with a key, so their review wouldn't be counted up at the top, because Steam just doesn't know if they paid for it or not. This one also activated with a key. Great platforming game for your kids. This will waste up to 6 or even more hours for your children. It's pretty cute too, and has lots of customizations plus collectathon. That doesn't sound too bad for a negative review. Let's see. I got it for under $3. I beat it under 6 hours. That sounds fine to me. That's not a terrible price. Here we have something from September 20th, 2017, Terrible Controls. Yeah, so perhaps the controls are part of the problem. Here's a terrible review. Though I gave this an unrecommended, I also recommend it. My review explains why. Please read more. No. Make a position. Take a position. Thumbs up, thumbs down. That's all you're allowed to say. If you've got reasons for it, good. If you don't have reasons for it, fine. Sorry if the screen was blurry there. Yeah, mob rule here. Frankly, this seems to be now a good enough game to be on the wish list. So few games actually make it to the wish list anyways. Although my wish list is very high, it is still very much heavily curated because I ask people to friend me on Steam and gift me games off the wish list as a way of supporting this channel. So the last thing I'd want to do is have something bad on the wish list, because then if somebody gifted it to me, I would feel bad about ripping into a game and being really negative. Although I am a critic, and let's face it, most critics are pretty negative anyways, depending on what you expect from them. Um, Next game we have to consider here is a game called Undead Horde. I believe this is a game that I saw earlier as a while looking at another game, and I added it or found out that it was already on the fall list anyways. This is 89% positive of 159 user reviews. It came out May 15th, 2019. It's $16.99. I don't think I'd really want this game for that price. I'd probably like it below $5. Apparently it came out on May 15th. Yeah, I just said that, didn't I? There's no multiplayer in this game, which kind of looks like a game that really would benefit from that. But yeah, the idea of having a horde of zombies follow you and you control them is an interesting idea, even in this instance when it is mostly just a top-down perspective, so you're not doing a lot with that. So I'm kind of willing to try this out. Again, I could look at the 17 negative reviews, but I would just be looking for trouble on this. Good idea, bad execution is one of the 3 reviews showing up in my language. So there's 14 other reviews that aren't even in English, or aren't labeled as being in English, at least. Yeah, I think I'm okay with putting this on the wish list. Now the danger here is, am I getting extremely generous as we hit the end of the list? Because I was getting certainly some more generous before. Alright, this game is tagged sexual content, so let's go blurry for a second so I make sure all the screenshots are YouTube family friendly. Let's see. Yeah, I think we're cool here, so we can bring this back. So, next game to consider is Under One Wing, which is 97% positive of 36 user reviews. This is a anime art style visual novel tagged with sexual content, although not tagged with nudity, so that may mean that it's just some sexual dialogue or something in it, or skimpy clothes. It says $29.99, for which for a visual novel is not asking an incredible amount. It has full audio Japanese. Unfortunately, very few visual novels have full audio English, and that would be very helpful. There's, let's see, we can get a includes touching, kissing, and situations presented without nudity. Characters enter a relationship that's not shown on screen. The acts are brought up in conversation. All characters portrayed are over the age of 18. There's a little bit of growing pain, certainly, on Steam as they began to allow games to be uncensored on their storefront. And this feels like a game that took the option to censor itself from Soul Press, and I believe Harmonize or Harmorize is a somewhat recognizable developer also. So I imagine what happened here is this game is something that you can find a patch for. There's one negative review here. I don't know how many visual novels I'd really want to cover, but if it's good enough, it's good enough. See, we could compare this and see what else Soul Press has published, and let's see, positive reviews, mixed reviews, not enough reviews, positive reviews, so not a lot you can really tell from that publisher. Yeah, I could put this on the wish list. That being said, I might very much just choose to never purchase any of the visual novels on the wish list, or just cover the top 10. The same is true for fighting games and JRPG games. I just don't have a clue how many of those I'm really going to end up covering. But I really don't have a great system to filter either. I think what will happen is if I ever do get around to covering visual novels, I'll cover a couple of them and then have my fill, and then at that point I would do at some point past that point I would do a wishlist cleanup and say, well, my standards have changed and my desires have changed. Also, maybe just own the visual novels and never play them. Maybe just own them and do a 30-minute spotlight of them and say, so far it seems so good. Or maybe I play it off screen completely and then just review it using clips, which is not really my style, since I do beginning to end full game commentary. But that doesn't mean I can't perhaps at some day change. None of these videos want to load. There's quite a few videos here too. This game, Unending Dusk, looks a lot like a clone of an arcade game. Whether it's, I guess you would call it maybe the X-Men arcade game or Ninja Turtles arcade game. Could be, frankly, any of the arcade games. That doesn't mean it's inherently bad. It just certainly isn't a style of gameplay design you would make before. This is barely 20 reviews, but it's 85% positive, so it does have relevancy. It came out March 18th, 2019, so it does have a good chance of getting more reviews before 6 months would happen, so I might as well just review it now. It made that metric. It's $11.99. There's really nothing wrong with that price. It's single player with online multiplayer, which you really would want to see with the 4-player issue here. Also, I would kind of want to hope you can either play it alone as a single player game, or you get 3 AI people that fight with you. Now, the funny thing, there's so rarely good beat 'em ups that get released or even thought about being made here. Is you'll have things like Mother Russia Bleeds, which I believe is a Devolver Digital, more of a joke game, or River City Ransom, which goes back to a retro pixel looking, or you have a modern game like Fury, which is a 3D fighting game of a completely different experience. So everything goes in a different direction, and quite often it's not that good. Castle Crashers came out in 2012, and it's a 4-player beat 'em up game. And frankly, I would say that Castle Crashers is probably the best recommendation to compare to this game. Here's a early access review that came out December 20th, 2018, that is negative, and then here's a game review from August 30th, 2018. It's weird they're saying the recently posted one is over here when this clearly was posted way earlier. Most of these reviews are early access, so the early access reviews, I think they still get counted, but maybe they don't once you leave early access. Let's see, it says 20 here. How many does it say here? 19 positive, 3 negative. Yeah, so early access still counts. I feel like I might be being too generous, but I'm gonna put Unending Dusk on the wish list too. Now, when a Steam sale happens and I have my wish list set, it will have, my wish list probably has about 1,000 games on it, so it's still a far jump to put my money where my mouth is. This is also a game I'd probably want to pay $4 for, not $12. I'm cheap. I usually wouldn't want to buy a game unless it's half off, unless it's brand new. And even if I was to buy a brand new game as a YouTuber, it doesn't feel like that would get me a lot of views. So I'm just such a small time YouTuber, it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend the extra money to try to ride a potential wave of excitement when the huge YouTubers are kind of doing that. Although even the big YouTubers have more and more played fewer and fewer games. The variety has dropped down quite a bit. So I do not remember ever seeing this game before, but I can definitely see what I was looking at here that was interesting me. It's a roguelite, which is a genre I definitely like to play. I don't like to play roguelikes because those don't really save any progress in between runs. But this also looks a lot like a Legend of Zelda inspired game. You're going through dungeons, you're lighting candles, and you're killing enemies. This is 93% positive of 418 user reviews. Suppose what could have happened, and the reason why I'm being so generous now and putting so many things on the wish list, is that a significant amount of games starting with the letter U were just completely removed from the follow list and the wish list before. That might be the case. I don't recall doing anything like that. Or maybe we've just run into a luck situation. I could look at the 30 negative reviews. Not necessary. Let's just speed this process up. This looks good. This can go to the wish list. Geez, seems like there's been yet one that's actually getting removed. Next game we have to consider is called Unknown Fate. It says it's an enigmatic story-driven action adventure set in a surreal world full of mind-twisting puzzles and bizarre creatures. Surreal is often used as a code word for we bought a bunch of Unity or Unreal assets and put it in our game without really thinking about it or having any reason to polish the assets so they look like they come from the same universe. Or surreal also can just mean that it is a case of the story is crazy for craziness sake. Yeah, when I think about true surrealist art, though, I think that there is an underlying message and intent behind it. I don't think it is just a random assortment of garbage. This game looks like it's sort of a random assortment of garbage. This also looks like it's a VR game. It's strange for a VR game to be mixed, even if it's pretty bad. So there must be something really, really bad about this. Also, this came out September 6th, 2018, and it only has 14 user reviews, which tells me that people started getting scared away from it and stopped buying it. Even if this was a good VR game, unless there's a non-VR way to play it, I would not be able to put it on the wish list, and I would just leave it on the follow list in case someday I actually buy a VR headset. I don't think I am going to buy a VR headset anytime in my life. Yeah, this game can be played without VR. It doesn't have the red warning box at the top. It's $14.99, so the real problem here is just the quality. A 48 on Metacritic is extremely low. You usually don't see things with a 48 on Metacritic. By the way, I have several plugins installed on Chrome to expand what Steam looks like. So that's where some of this information shows up and why it might not be showing up on your page. Meanwhile, It's saying play things like Abduction. That's a VR game, or a game you can play in VR with puzzles in a kind of weird world. And it's suggesting several other things that maybe are good, maybe aren't. I don't know if many of them are great. Or we could look at what this developer is trying to sell. The publisher is also trying to sell. It seems like they mostly sell military games. Alright, so I'm supposed to be looking at the negative reviews. First thing it shows me is a positive review because of amount of RAM. Poor gameplay, poor narrative experience, good mechanics. Let's see. Twisted dreamlike world of the game is set in is really good, but unfortunately the mechanics of the game are so poor that I'm not willing to support them. There's no options for anything, no free locomotion or snap or smooth turning, poor support for the Oculus Rift. This might be an example of a game that is way better to play outside of VR than it is inside of VR, and that's kind of hard to ever figure out or tell. We're seeing kind of the same reviews, problems with the mechanics more than anything. So I assume even when you're playing outside of VR, this is bad. And I guess it doesn't really matter. Inherently, there is only one review for a game, even if it has two modes in which it can be played. And for that reason, Unknown Fate may be the first game, if not the second, that is going to get removed from the follow list. This is not a game that needs to stay on the follow list because it's VR. It doesn't need to stay on the follow list because it's bad, for lack of a better term. Next game we have to consider is called Unsacrifice, with no user reviews, and it's not out yet. So this is linking to an itch.io game. So I made the mistake in the previous times of putting games that weren't out yet on the follow list. I really don't need to do that, I've come to realize, because I look at every game that comes out on Steam. I watch at least a couple of mainstream video game websites that would talk about games if they come out and they're good. There's really not a big chance that I would miss the release of a game if it's even moderately good. Meanwhile, most games that come out on a daily basis on Steam are total garbage. This I really don't have to evaluate, so Unsacrifice is going to get removed from the follow list. I doubt I would put it on the wish list when it does come out anyways. My standards have increased a decent amount. Next game we have to consider is called Untouchable. This came out May 21st, 2018. Seeing the Asian publisher name and developer name here, I'm wondering if this might be a cheap Chinese game and I just didn't have the wherewithal to recognize that's what this is. Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. English. Well, Japanese is above the fold, where Chinese is below the fold, so that implies to me that it's actually a Japanese game. Let's see. Let's look at the 3 negative reviews. Meanwhile, Touhou Luna Nights is a platforming game. This might be a game that I actually need to add to my wish list or follow list. Let's see. The good thing about these cleanups, or the bad thing, depending on your perspective, is that a lot of these cleanups videos do end up having me look at new games and add more things to the follow list than take it off. Although, no, it's not more, it's just adding new things to the list. Which, that's fine if things cycle on and off the follow list as I change my mind. This is a hard one to really wrap my head around. On the face of it, it looks good. It's just a little bit pixely for a 2018 game, and it feels like if this is a Japanese game, this is made by an indie person, a single or a small indie development team. See how the video here is not showing you any video of actual gameplay. And the description here doesn't say anything. Untouchable is a fantasy-themed adventure game where the player wanders into a world of fantasy and begins an adventurous journey. It's extremely generic as far as the description. So we have an Asian negative review. We have a French negative review. Let's see. Well, I got that this review asked for a refund, and that's pretty much all I can get from this, from my rudimentary understanding of English. Let's see. I'm trying to look over here. Here, I think is saying that the controls don't work, and they had to mash the buttons, from what I'm getting. Let's see. It seems like you're saying okay graphics, bad, maybe audio, and some charming music, perhaps. Yeah, my understanding of French is not high enough. Well, this game just doesn't have relevancy. I don't know why I'm jumping over difficult things and trying to read French reviews. It just doesn't have relevancy. It doesn't have 20 user reviews. Clearly, this game is getting removed from the follow list. If I just remind myself to follow my own lists, that would be good. As far as Touhou Luna Nights, there's a whole Touhou series of games that are platforming beat 'em up games, and I don't think this is on my wish list, and it clearly should be. It's kind of a platforming beat 'em up style games. So yeah, that'll go to the wish list. Moving back to the next game we had on for consideration. Next game we have is called Urban's Clans Card Battle. I'm always looking for a new card game because I'm looking to see if maybe there's something good enough to replace Hearthstone, which I play every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So far, I really haven't found anything good enough for this. This game has 5 reviews. It came out October 3rd, 2018. That pretty much tells me that this game is not relevant, even if it does have a fancy animation section here. Unless this is a single player game, and even if this was a single player game instead of a online multiplayer game, which then it wouldn't really be able to replace Hearthstone. Yeah, all of this is single player, but actually that doesn't change anything at all, because Slay the Spire is a single player deck building game you could play, and it has way more relevancy than 5 user reviews. And this is from a publisher, Plugin Digital, and Plugin Digital has some bit of stuff that they've published. Perhaps they're not a great publisher in general. Seems like most of the things that they publish are not good games. And there is something to be said about a game being in bad company and it would be very nice to be able to shop by publisher and say, well, this publisher is known for putting out good games versus other publishers who are known for putting out bad games. There definitely are some publishers on Steam that if I would see them, I would immediately remove the game and not consider it. But I really don't have to do that in this case because it's just not relevant again. Doesn't have that 20 reviews, so we can just move on. And that would be the end of games starting with the letter U. And we've only been going about 50 minutes. So I could end the recording here and make more recordings. But I think what we'll do is go through at least the games starting with V, because there might only be a couple of them. Now W is the big amount, so maybe I would stop and make an episode specifically for W. That's something to consider too. But right now, let's look at Vandals. Vandals, on the face of it, looks like a fine game, but it's only 76% positive and it has 17 user reviews. It came out April 12th, 2018. It might have been early access originally. This looks kind of like a puzzle game I covered, Lara Croft Go and Hitman Go from Ubisoft. Those games were alright, but they got kind of annoying in the long run. There seems to be, if I recall correctly, something weird about how this game in particular plays, and that lost a lot of steam for it, and that's why people stopped getting interested in buying it. We could see here, can't get through the tutorial, the thing is broken. That was July 29th, 2018. Let's see, says it's a non-violent tactics game for your inner Banksy. Here's one that says, controls are terrible, have to click to move, mobile port, slow paced. It says $3.99, which is discounted, which even discounted is too much, according to that review. After about an hour, I'm pretty bored. It's a fairly simple puzzle game that doesn't introduce mechanics fast enough. It's too bad because spraying your own custom graffiti on the walls is awesome. Also, the game has optional information about graffiti to pick up. For example, how it started and profiles on artists. If you want a simple puzzle game, then maybe this is the pick this up when it's on sale. In comparison, Hitman Go from Ubisoft, I believe, has a very positive review with 810 reviews. Or Lara Croft Go would probably be another recommendation to consider, but they're not recommending that one, are they? Yeah, I just think this is a worst case version of something I've already played a couple times and didn't like, and it just doesn't have relevancy, so Vandals can get removed. Next game we have to consider is Vanguard Normandy 14 1944. I am not big into first-person shooters, particularly military shooters, and not my thing. So that already puts a strike against this. But what clearly happened is I put this game on the fall list and saw something here that I wanted to be fair enough to give it a chance, and in a very short time it's had 90 user reviews, giving a 61% review. It's early access too. There's really no reason to assume that it would get better in the long run. I could understand a couple ideas. If I was looking for a military shooter that wasn't run by EA or any of the big AAA developers, that might make a little bit of sense. But if I was going to do that, I think I'd go with Sniper Elite, or at least the most recent Sniper Elite game. I still don't know if that's really a game I'd want to play. I would want to look probably for a World War II shooter, uh, more than a Modern Warfare style shooter. That strikes me as kind of silly. Uh, there's not a lot of interesting stories that you can tell uh, based on real world events in Modern Warfare. You're just at that point telling a made up story, and it might as well be set in the future and be a Halo game at that point. Yeah, as things are here, maybe the fact that it was using the CryEngine caught my attention, even because very few games these days use the Crysis engine, CryEngine. Almost all first-person shooters are Unreal engine or some custom engine if it's a really big company that has their own in-house engine. So it would be interesting to see a modern game, like a very new game, use the Crysis engine and see how well you can program to that and how well the game works. With the Epic Store becoming a thing and becoming a thing people don't like, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing a few companies get away from using the Unreal Engine and instead use the Crysis engine, but that's not highly likely. And if anything, you might succeed at making a game in the Unity engine, even if it is something that you would in the past have used the Unreal Engine for. That's pretty inside baseball stuff and background programming stuff, though. Not something that a game consumer really needs to know anything about. Next game we have to consider here is Varney, or Varney. Yeah? G? Yeah. I'm just gonna go with Varney. It's a point and click adventure, if I was to guess. It's full of puzzles and mini games. It's 89% positive of 713 user reviews. Came out July 3rd, 2018. I imagine it's because this is free to play that it wasn't on the wish list. In the past, free to play games I wasn't putting on the wish list because it doesn't make a lot of sense to put them on the wish list. In this case, seems like the full game DLC is $4.99, so there's actually some deceptive practices going on here in a small part. Meanwhile, this kids game is getting recommended against a horror point and click visual novel and a mixed game and another walking simulator game, I think. And this is another horror point and click game. This is another horror game. The recommendation engine is still pretty garbage. The game is broken. Check bugs on the second act with spiders and collecting numbers. When I'm trying to use help, it's pointing to nothing. The number key is absent on the screen, impossible to pass. People found this most helpful. Is there a developer response here? No, it's saying just email me, which the fact that a developer's response is hidden and you can just say email me is really not not really responding to anything or being helpful. See, a significant amount of people got this game via key from assumedly a third-party site. Like, almost all the reviews are key reviews, but that doesn't really change anything. The only thing that's slightly weird here is this DLC. So, this DLC unlocks all 8 chapters of the game. It seems like they don't even fully make that obvious. It's taking almost a shareware approach, and Steam really doesn't have a way of looking at that. Like, they really don't have a way to put chapter 1 free, and then the rest you have to pay for. The closest thing, and the way you're supposed to do it, would be free demo, which you could have a button that was a free demo, and then the complete full game. Although this complete edition for $9.99 is charging you for buying the full game DLC, the soundtrack for another $2.99, the strategy guide for $2.99. And why does a game like this need a strategy guide? This is supposed to be a kid-friendly game, and a second soundtrack for another $2.99. So that they're nickeling and diming you, for lack of a better term. But it looks like it's good enough. So I'll put actually the full game DLC on the wish list. That way I can tell for certain that that is the part that I would need to buy. I often make the mistake of getting just the basic version of a game, and then I have to go back and look at it and go, oh, actually, if I'm gonna bother to cover this, I might as well own the entire game and all the DLC and the complete versions. DLC has gotten just worse and worse in general in gaming, to the point where a significant percentage of games are not a complete experience, and you have to do way too much research to find out what DLC you really would want and what DLC you absolutely have to have. Alright, so next game we have to consider here is Venture Kid, which looks like an old NES game. Unfortunately, it's not relevant because it has 12 user reviews, even though they're 91% positive. So many people make retro looking, pixel graphics looking games, and I think this really is kind of a, well, I guess you'd call it like a Mega Man clone, for lack of a better term, or just an old NES game clone. But it was made in 2018, and really I don't expect people to make games that look like games from the 80s, or that play like games from the 80s. I know people have nostalgia, but they have nostalgia for games that actually came out back then. They don't have nostalgia for the pixel art style. At least I don't. I definitely don't. I hate the pixel art style, and I'll never really be sold on it. Apparently this has only 9 levels and bosses, which seems a little low too. They want $10 for it. Let's see, I could look at the 5 negative reviews. A lot of people got the game for free. Let's see. Windowed mode is not supported by default. Frame drop on the full screen. Game is freezing every interval. Very beggar game refund. Meanwhile, if you wanted to play a much more polished version of a throwback to an old game, Katana Zero might be your choice. The Messenger might be your choice. Celeste might be your choice. Shovel Knight might be your choice. I've been told to play Shovel Knight and haven't gotten around to it. Here's the Messenger. There's a significant amount of other games that have more importance. This Gato Robo has way more reviews, and it's a black and white Metroidvania style game. Yeah, so Steam really has a ton of games already that are retro throwbacks. I will say this game is a little bit more zoomed in on the camera, but that's kind of it. It's zoomed in to make it kind of feel like a Game Boy game if it was colorized. Yeah, though still not relevant, so it can be removed. Let's see, next game we have to consider is Vestige. Vestige is a room scale documentary that uses volumetric capture to take the viewer on the journey in the mind of Lisa. Volumetric capture apparently being a art thing run over regular video. Like, as far as I know, there's no real technology that would capture images that look like this. If the lines were horizontal instead of vertical, it might be like a laser radar technology, but you would never use a laser radar technology to scan in people. I don't think, because you'd probably blind them with the lasers, even if it was an infrared. And the colors here really don't match. This really just is a filter over regular video. Alright, well, it's 76% positive with 13 user reviews. It's a VR only game, so I'd leave it on the follow list anyways. I would say this as a VR game looks like it's trying to do something different. Although I'm not sure that there actually is any gameplay here, and this isn't more of you're just watching a video. Like, yeah, they're calling it a VR experience. Yeah, here it says it's a film based on a true story for 13 minutes. 13 minutes for $5. English and French, both audio supported. Yeah. I don't think you would want that. Meanwhile, if you wanted, like, something else, there's other VR games that I wouldn't recommend also. Yeah, this can easily be removed. It's not relevant. It's not a game. I couldn't criticize it. I would be putting the entirety of the video on YouTube in some weird way. So I probably didn't even recognize that it wasn't a game when I first looked at it. I do like the thought of doing an art style like that, but that art style frankly should probably only be done in like a flashback scene of a much bigger game, to hide the identity of characters, not throughout the entirety of the game. Next game we have to consider here is Visage. It's a first-person psychological horror game. It is 64% positive of 42 user reviews in the last 30 days, but 85% positive of 1,191 user reviews over its lifetime. It came out October 2nd, 2018. Now this is a significant drop in the reviews. So, seeing that it's early access, I assume the issue here is this is abandonware. And it promised a bunch of things and didn't deliver. 3D horror games have gotten so good that even a low effort asset flip horror game looks really, really good. I wouldn't really call this an asset flip on this screenshot. There is a lot in that room that is specifically placed. That being said, this definitely looks like they just had one generic textured monster body and copy and pasted it in a dark, empty room. And that doesn't look that good. Then you have some kind of tonal inconsistencies. Are these clothesless creatures the monsters, or is this girl in a dress the monster, or they're just two monsters? And what does that have anything to do with this room? And here is an example of what I call dark screenshot syndrome, which happens a lot in horror games when you're playing with flashlights. So even the screenshot, there's a significant portion over here you can't really see anything, over here you can't really see anything. So at least a quarter of this screenshot is not showing anything. Or this is a pretty good screenshot, but it's not really telling you anything other than there will be one sequence like that, and that's it. And then you get back to this room and it's just full of things. So it kind of feels like it's all over the place. This would be a game I would guess they actually were working on very hard, and then they gave up on it. Let's see. Visage Battle Royale came out April 1st. I assume that's an April Fool's Day joke, but people probably should take off their April Fool's Day jokes after April Fool's Day has happened. That was months ago as of this recording. So, don't know how to really take that. That seems like that's just a little immature. I think the April Fool's Day jokes from game companies and people in general are terrible and should be given up on, particularly if you're trying to run a business. Let's see what the negative reviews are. Let's see. May 13th. It must have just come out of early access very, very recently. This game is horrible. I waited 4 years for this game and it's not scary whatsoever. 3 AM. The Krusty Krab was scarier than this. Has Visage gone through any material updates or improvements to either its contents or mechanics since its release in late 2018? Question mark. Don't buy. Wasted 2 years to play this game. Game's dead on arrival. Devs still haven't released second chapter. Rest in peace. Is this thing still in early access? I thought it wasn't. No, it's still in early access. Yeah. Yeah, this has just been abandoned as far as what people are consider it. So, yeah. This can be removed from the follow list. It's not even my type of game, frankly. I don't know how many horror games I'd really want to play anyways. I'm fine with playing them. I like playing horror games when they're good, particularly action horror games like Resident Evil versus just helpless horror games where you have to run away from monsters. That being said, they don't really... I'm going to censor out just for pretty obvious reasons. So, yeah, what was I talking about? Yeah, horror games don't scare me, so it always feels weird to try and cover them because it's just like I try to evaluate them, but without being jump scared, you lose a lot of the elements. So next game we have to consider is Vixens from Outer Space, and it's tagged early access and nudity, more importantly, and it is an example of a game that's just not YouTube family friendly, even though there are pixelations and blurring being shown here. That video just jumped right into it, and all this game is it's a first-person shooter kind of asset flip game where the main character is a female in what I believe is called a body harness, which is effectively the inverse of a bikini, not covering up any of the important bits. And that's, I think, really all I can and need to say about this. The reviews are mixed with 15 reviews, so clearly even people who see what it is and would want an adult game like this are not having a good experience. There's several other games on Steam that are fully uncensored that I think would set you in a better position than this. What would be a first-person shooter with nudity? What would be a good one to compare it to? Apparently you die in one-hit kills also. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what a first-person shooter with nudity would be. Let's unblur that. Sorry, couldn't show any more of that. But YouTube has its stupid family friendliness things, and that's a good point to mention. That this definitely a growing pain of Steam, that where the screenshots should be able to be flagged a little bit easier, and they should be looked at before they go live on Steam Store. Every screenshot, every video should be family friendly. The storefront should be family friendly, even if the game is completely uncensored. Now, we may run into a visual novel from Manga Gamer, and Manga Gamer potentially is going to leave Steam because they're being a little dishonest about the visual novels they're selling. They tried to sell this game that they claimed was a educational software to teach Esperanto and has absolutely no sexual content whatsoever. And then I looked at the video, and in the middle of the video, two of the characters are kissing on open mouth, on deeply and passionately. The characters are in a bathtub together, bathing together, and they're clearly, there's some romance and sexual elements in that game. So at this point, it might be a case of Steam being a little bit too puritanical on Manga Gamer, but then Manga Gamer's response was to straight up lie and be disingenuous. And they had already been doing, in particular, a trick where they were putting censored versions of games on Steam to push people to go to their own store and buy the uncensored version, which is kind of not good way to treat your customers. And that brings up some thoughts that maybe Steam is going to back down from its previously stated stance of allowing anything and everything on Steam unless it was either illegal or straight up trolling. Steam has been back and forth on that, but for the last few months they've been pretty good. As of this recording, they've been very good about letting everything on or rejecting things in a way in which publishers did not complain. And PlayStation has been way worse about censoring things or requiring things to be censored. That's a rant, though. I would think that like GTA or what is the other one with the purple gang? What is that? It's called Get Out of Hell. Let's see. Saints Row. Yeah, I think the Saints Row game series would be a GTA clone where you could run around and shoot and probably see some nudity. But yeah, I don't know what else you would go with. There's probably a Tomb Raider game or two that you could put a nude mod on. I'm sure those exist. Anyways, moving on, we have a game here called Void Memory. This is 75% positive with 98 user reviews. Came out October 30th, 2017. It says it's a Metroidvania. To me, it would look a little bit more like a Castlevania, just in the art style. It seems like it's not fully widescreen. It seems like it's a little simplistic. This game does feel like I could probably find a couple other games in the same style of gameplay that are better received. There is a bit of a red flag when you see a developer put their entire collection in a bundle, 23 games for $58. Although that's sometimes actually helpful too, because if you actually like all the games that a publisher has, getting it in a bundle will save you extra money. This is tagged English and Korean, so that might explain the art style being a little bit different. You compare it to something like Salt and Sanctuary or Death's Gambit, these are pretty good references. Hollow Knight has got a lot more relevancy, but just because it's not the biggest game ever doesn't mean that it's a game that should be ignored. That being said, 75% is really on the edge, and when we come down here, the most helpful review is a negative review. Let's see if I can scroll down to the bottom. All in all, Void Memory is a poorly made game that favors cheap and artificial difficulty over an actual challenge. Its own innovation design has only hurt it more rather than allowing it to stand out. 3 out of 10. Apparently, when it was edited, this was December 25th, 2018. See, here's some positive reviews that are totally useless. Yes, a little bit clunky, but good overall. This might be a game that is review manipulating. And that's why it's still maintaining 76%. Or maybe it's selling itself off to past the fact that it's claiming to be like a Dark Souls-esque game. Like, what you see here though is one negative review here. Seems to be a pretty significant amount of negative reviews, whereas here there's very few negative reviews compared to 11 positive reviews and a long run of very positive reviews for months and months and months. I think this game is probably a little just too borderline, and because of that reason I think I don't need to really cover it. I've never seen any of these other games also, which is strange that a publisher would have so many games on Steam and I would have not seen any of them, because I thought I'd seen pretty much everything. Yeah, well, guess it doesn't matter. Yep, this can get removed. It's just too borderline at 75%. There's too many other games with way more people who have played them to cover that are in a very similar way. Maybe I would come back if I played Salt and Sanctuary and liked it quite a bit. Maybe I'd come back and play this later. I suppose there's a lot of game developers out there that made Dark Souls-like style games, and if you were a huge fan of Dark Souls and you'd played all the official Dark Souls games, maybe you would go and try and play Dark Souls-like games. But I kind of question that. I think if something is super popular and a genre-defining game, people tend to just play it over and over again. There's certainly a lot of Smash Brothers clones on Steam, but nobody really plays them. They just play Smash Brothers, or whatever the newest version is, or whatever version is getting played at EVO. Next game we have to consider here is Valentia. This is a 63% positive of 11 reviews, came out May 3rd, 2018. We don't really need to look at the reviews, it's not relevant. It doesn't have enough reviews anyways. On top of that, if we just look at the screenshots for a second here, this looks like a pretty boring strategy game anyways. I kind of question why this is even on the follow list. Maybe there was something I was seeing before. Maybe I was just being way too generous. It really shouldn't be on the follow list. Next game we have to consider is Volcanoids. In the last 30 days, it's had 66% positive with 12 user reviews. Over its lifetime, it's been 75% positive. This came out January 29th, 2019. I guess since this is early access, I could just not consider it and leave it for 6 months from now or a year from now whenever I get around to doing the next follow list cleanup, which very well might be a year from now, might even be a year and a half or from now, maybe even 2, depending on how big the follow list gets again. This looks like it's a slightly inspired BioShock game with also some movable base building elements. It's kind of an interesting idea. That being said, if I really was going to make a decision here, I would say, well, this is not high enough. This is very on the edge, and this is definitely not high enough. So clearly the game has not gotten better but gotten worse. And so once I started looking at the reviews, I imagine I'll find more problems with it. That being said, I'll let this ride, since it didn't get a full 6 months. It really only got maybe 5 months. Well, it's not before January 1st, and that was the time frame I was looking at. Next game we have here is VR Rome. The graphics don't look particularly good here. This is $14.99 in the VR game. Came out November 5th, 2018, and look how long it took the page to reload. It took a good 20-30 seconds to reload that page. So out of RAM. I don't think there's a sell here, frankly. I think the graphics are just too bad. I, in general, kind of like the idea of a VR game where you could go on vacations and look at Rome as it is present day or Rome as it is in the past, particularly when you're avoiding crowds and the expense of traveling. But each of these buildings is being 3D modeled, but not being 3D modeled particularly well. There's a real lack of texture here. Just repeated tile sets, simplistic textures on the columns. This really does not look good. It looks oversimplified. And I assume each of these red dots are a place you can go, or maybe you can even teleport around, but then everything outside of these red dots are probably not realistic depictions of anything. Yeah, just visually unimpressive, and the one thing you would want in VR is for it to look hyper realistic and impressive, and that just doesn't have that. Alright, and so then that leaves us with Walden a game. Now, let's see. I think since we've been going an hour and 28 minutes, this is a good point to end this recording. So we did games starting with U and V. Next time we'll do games starting with W, and very possibly all the games after W, because there's probably only about 20 on the list after that point. Or it may even become a case of next time we just do games that start with W, and then there's a third recording. Next time there is a wish list, well, this is a follow list cleanup. Next time there's a video like this, though, the lists are going to be considerably shorter, so I very possibly will jump through 3 or 4 letters of the alphabet consistently. But yeah, this is a good point to end, so as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. When you subscribe, click that notification bell. And if you want to support this channel and help it continue to make content, there's a link down below to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. There's always a Steam sale coming around. That's a great time. and that is why we're doing all this work, is to curate the wish list so only the best of the best games are on are things that I'm actually considering covering. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.